In the name of Allah, hello and welcome to Forum, Saar Television's weekly political roundtable. In tonight's program, we shall be discussing the conference regarding Holocaust which took place in Tehran. To help me to do so, we're joined here in our Tehran studio by Mehran Qasemi, who's a journalist. Mr. Qasemi, welcome to Forum. It's a pleasure to have you. Joining us in our London studio, we have a lady Michèle Renouf, human rights activist. Lady Renouf, welcome to Forum.
Thank you so much. Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum assalam. Before I put the first question to our guests, here's a report for you. Iran's President Mahmoud Ahmadinejad kicked off a fact-finding mission, a two-day conference called Review of the Holocaust, Global Vision, with the stated intent of determining the nature and extent of the Holocaust. Over 60 researchers and intellectuals from some 30 countries attended the conference. Hosting an international conference on the Holocaust, Iran's President Mahmoud Ahmadinejad said that Israel's days are numbered. Iran says it organized the conference to shed light on reasons behind the formation of the State of Israel after the Second World War and to allow researchers from countries where it is a crime to question the Holocaust to speak freely. Mr. Ahmadinejad said, "I want to tell the Western countries, just as the Soviet Union was wiped out and today it does not exist, so will the Zionist regime soon be wiped out." The comments received applause from groups at the conference, including ultra-Orthodox anti-Israel Jews and Europeans and American writers who view the Holocaust as either fabricated or exaggerated. Delegates at the conference agreed to form what they call a fact-finding committee to study the Holocaust. Meanwhile, in a letter to its rabbis in the US, the Neturei Karta religious and anti-Zionist sect said their objective in attending the Tehran conference was to publicize the difference between Judaism and Zionism, as well as exploring the subject of the Holocaust. They insist not every Jew is a Zionist, which does not represent the people of Israel. Inviting researchers from countries where it is a crime to question the conference, Iran hosted the two-day conference starting on Wednesday, December the 13th. Germany, European Commission, US, and the Zionist regime condemned the Holocaust meeting. Lady Renouf, you attended the conference in Tehran. Would you please tell us your assessments of what happened in that conference?
Well, I thought that conference actually was a victory for democratic freedom of research and expression. And I think Dr. Ahmadinejad has been well vindicated, proved correct, that when he accuses the free West, the free world, in quotes, which of course we know is false, this is not the case, that when he says that we have a grotesque hypocrisy, he is absolutely correct, because we do not have democracy in the free world, because we do not have in our governments, most of the governments do not have any other opportunity for voting except for pro-Zionist policies. So we don't have the democracy that we wish we had, but we do when we go to Tehran. And so I congratulate the Iranians for, first of all, for voting a man who speaks the truth bravely like Ahmadinejad, for voting him in as their president, and for the IPIS, the Institute for Political and International Research Studies, in order to allow us 800 papers they were presented. So many people wanted to come and take that opportunity, that democratic opportunity that Iran offered us. And so we gloried in it, and it was a huge victory, and I congratulate the Iranian people for standing firm, for not being intimidated, for not colluding. They stood firm within and without. They had pressure from without and they had pressure from within. And they still stood firm and didn't crumple. And actually they are like the voters of Hamas. They refuse to collude with the lie that Israel has any decent intentions toward anybody.
Thank you. Joining us in the US, we have Dr. Norman Finkelstein, Political Science Department, DePaul University. Dr. Finkelstein, welcome to Forum.
Thank you very much for having me.
It's a pleasure, sir. So, would you tell us, as far as you're concerned, why should a scientific and historic conference taking place in Tehran receive so much criticism?
Well, I think there are two aspects to that question. I'll give you two aspects from two different perspectives. The reason I think it receives so much criticism is, first of all, because of current relations between the United States and Iran and the desperate effort to delegitimize the current Iranian regime. And to the extent that the criticism of the conference was motivated by that particular concern, in my view, it's illegitimate. But there's a second aspect, and it seems to me honest people have to speak honestly about it. I do not believe that a serious attempt was made to hold a serious conference in Iran on the question of the Nazi Holocaust. A serious I am not claiming that a serious conference would have not come under criticism. Rather the contrary, I'm pretty clear-headed enough to know that even had it been a serious conference, it would have come under criticism. The problem was that, in my view, no effort was made to make a serious conference, and that's a problem. There are very good scholars, excellent researchers on the topic of the Nazi Holocaust, researchers who are not motivated by political considerations. And to my knowledge, they were not invited to the conference. The people who were invited to the conference are not scholars in the field, and generally speaking, they're not scholars at all. And I think that's, I think that's a discredit to Iran. If you want to hold the conference, of course you have the right to. And even if you invite the wrong people, you still have the right to. But from the point of view of a serious scholarly inquiry, it was not a serious conference. And I think people have to be honest about that. What does David Duke know about the Nazi Holocaust? He's not a scholar in the field. He's not written anything on the subject. Now, I was approached early on to attend the conference. And in order for me to attend, I said there would have to be three conditions met. Number one, I asked them for the list of invitees to see whether this was going to be a serious conference or whether it was going to be a circus. Number two, I said, if I'm going to travel all the way to Iran to attend a conference on the Nazi Holocaust, I should be allocated a reasonable amount of time to make a reasonable statement, a serious statement on the subject. And number three, I said, if I'm coming to Iran, then let me speak at the university to students in an open meeting to discuss the topic. Now, unfortunately, we were in negotiations until the very end, but none of those conditions were met. And I had to conclude, if you don't want to tell me who's invited, if you don't want to give me a respectable amount of time to speak, and if you don't let me speak to students at the university, then this is not going to be a serious conference. It's going to be a circus, and there's no point in attending. So I don't want to in any way pretend that even a serious conference would have been well received by the West. But this was plainly not a serious conference, and we should be honest about it.
Okay. Mehran Hassani, your views, sir.
Well, any kind of official research into this Holocaust myth or Holocaust event is inherently biased, in Western countries. That's because if you are going to revise the numbers of those Jews killed downwards, not only it's considered immoral or illegal, you would be labeled anti-Semitic, you would be fired from your job, you would be somehow sent to jail. So in Western countries, people or those scholars do not have the chance to revise this historical event. But in Iran, I guess people from all over the world, from 32 countries, they had the chance to express their say on this historical issue. So this is something that should be welcomed, If someone is posing a theory, if someone is speaking about the historical event, your response should not be insulting those guys, I mean, calling them or labeling them as anti-Semitic or something like this. You could have the same thing, you could have the same conference somewhere else in the world and ask those who believe in Holocaust to express their own views, you know. What we see here in response to the conference which was held in Iran is not something usual, you know. The Western countries are trying to label a scientific conference, a scientific gathering, as a way, or I mean, they are trying to somehow relate this to political issues between Iran, Israel, and the United States.
Lady Michèle Renouf, can I have your comments regarding what Dr. Finkelstein had to say?
Yes, I greatly honor Dr. Finkelstein. In fact, in my film, Jailing Opinions, I very much talk about the term he uses, turn speak, which I call twist speak, which we can talk about later. But I would say to him, first of all, there will be another opportunity for him to be invited. In fact, I am on that committee of 5, and I would be very happy for him to come under any terms that he wishes to the next conference. In fact, I think it's unfortunate that he didn't come. I don't know that it's important who else is going to be there. The concept of worrying about who else is on a platform is a very limiting, silly idea, to be with respect. But may I quote the veteran historical revisionist Professor Robert Faurisson in answer to some of these questions, because he said in 1980, in summing up in one sentence the findings produced by the revisionist research, and I quote, "The alleged Hitlerite gas chambers and the alleged genocide of the Jews form one and the same historical lie, which has permitted a gigantic political and financial swindle whose main beneficiaries are the State of Israel and the international Zionism, and whose main victims are the German people, but not their leaders, and the Palestinian people in their entirety." Now, I know that Dr. Finkelstein would certainly agree with some of that, because he produced the very important book, The Holocaust Industry. But I think he's not taking into account the importance of well, he certainly did mention that no matter what, however the conference was run, it would still be criticized. This is the most important thing that he did say about that. Opportunity of holding both sides of the debate. And that is the issue, both sides of the debate. And that debate is not simply about the Holocaust as such. It's also about the effects of the Holocaust as a Holocaustianity, as a new religion that allows Israel and those who are pro-Zionist to undertake and persuade us by proxy to do their missions. And this is the important thing, and I think that David Duke is one person who has written a very, very important book called Jewish Supremacism, and therefore he brings to the debate other aspects, not just simply about the what may or may not have occurred during that period, which we call the Holocaust. In fact, it's been given a pseudo-religious term. In fact, now this 6 million is not allowed to be queried as a religion, because the 6 is a very significant figure in religious terms. In the fact that mathematics is now not allowed to say 6 minus 3 equals 6 with a question mark after it, even though the plaque at Auschwitz, which is called the Holy of Holies, has now been changed from 4 to 1 million, though 3 million is still, in 10 countries, not allowed to be eliminated from this magical 6 million. And so that there are so many aspects to this whole, that's why they called it a global vision. They're not just talking about who was shot, how many people were shot, whether they were gassed, whether they weren't, these kind of war crime aspects. They're talking about who benefits, what was the circumstance, like we should be talking about the so-called mythical weapons of mass destruction. And the same people brought us that mythology, so that we must make the relationship between who benefits and what aspires as a consequence of these Hollywood versions of history, as opposed to finding out in normal discourse what are the facts and the fantasies involved in war crimes.
Thank you. Dr. Finkelstein, nothing seems to be taboo in the West anymore. No more religious, moral, ethical taboos. We have prophets being reviled, cartooning prophets. Everything is allowed. There's only one taboo left, and that is to query this, the Holocaust and just anything anti-Zionism. Why is that the case?
Well, I don't exactly. Let me make a few remarks in response to what I've heard, and then I'll address your question. I don't think it's accurate to say that the people who were represented at the conference have made significant or, in fact, any scholarly contributions to the understanding of the Nazi Holocaust. David Duke is not a scholar on the Nazi Holocaust. Robert Faurisson is not a scholar on the Nazi Holocaust. This is to heap discredit on what scholarship is all about. I don't accept that proposition. Number two, there's a very big difference between a historical event and the exploitation of the historical. The fact that the Nazi Holocaust was exploited for political and ideological purposes does not mean the Nazi Holocaust did not happen. That's just not silly. It's not serious. And you embarrass yourselves when you make claims like that. You're not embarrassing the actual victims of the Nazi Holocaust. You're not embarrassing those who have researched the topic of the Nazi Holocaust. You embarrass yourselves when you make claims like that. Number three, I agree that you don't decide whether or not to attend a conference on the basis of whether or not everybody at the conference you agree with or you think everyone at the conference is serious. I agree with that. On the other hand, if you are a serious student of science, you do not attend a conference where every member belongs to the Flat Earth Society. That does not make sense because it's not going to be a serious exchange of views. And to attend a conference where all the other participants believe the Nazi Holocaust is a myth is the equivalent of attending a conference with the Flat Earth Society. It makes no sense. As to the last question you put to me, namely, why is this a taboo or the one and only taboo? That's just not true. There are many taboos in the United States.
Such as?
For example, let's take the case of the attack on Iraq. The only thing you're allowed to discuss in the question of Iraq in the United States is whether or not it was wise for our president to try to bring democracy to Iraq. Some people say it was a good idea, and others say, no, it was not a good idea because the Arabs don't understand democracy. Nobody was allowed to say that the president had no interest whatever in bringing democracy to Iraq. That was a taboo. There are many taboos in political life in the United States, of which one,
But they're all related.
I agree, is the taboo on the Nazi Holocaust.
Lady Renouf, you wanted to make a comment.
Well, several actually, but I would certainly say that, well, first of all, not all the people there by any means were believers. I myself am not particularly, the issue for me is not whether the Hollywood version of the Holocaust is accurate or not accurate. What is important is that we should be able to speak about it in a normal debate, which is the basis of our Western culture, without being smeared, imprisoned, terrorized, or intimidated. And you don't have to be a scholar to qualify for that kind of treatment. And secondly, certainly the Neturei Karta people certainly do believe that the Holocaust took place. There are many people actually who were at the conference who say, but even so, whether they are all, as you want to call, flat earth, Dr. Finkelstein, what is the problem with actually expressing your views at any given opportunity that you can? Because so few people, such as yourself, have the moral fiber to stand up against this particular world organization, world Zionism, to actually say what you believe. Any platform is good enough for that, in my view. Certainly this exploitation, as you speak of, is not a conspiracy theory, it is a fact. We have gone into Iraq and we are covered with blood and shame as a consequence of believing the pro-Zionist lobby in Washington. These things, they only have power in Washington over, and our enthrallment with this Holocaustianity is the reason that they have this power. It is all related. It's not simply isolated. And this putting two and two together is the thing that we are being prevented from doing. And that is what the Iran conference permitted. And it was a great pity that we didn't have you there. I hope we will have you there next time.
Ask those who believe in Holocaust to express their own views, you know. What we see here in response to the conference which was held in Iran is not something usual, you know. The Western countries are trying to label a scientific conference, a scientific gathering, as a way, or I mean, they.
I am a strong believer in the principles of liberty of speech. We have no disagreement about that. As far as I'm concerned, the Flat Earth Society has every right to organize societies, organize conferences, organize meetings, publish books, publish conference papers. No problem. But there is a difference between kitchen table talk and a scholarly conference. If you're going to have a scholarly conference on a serious topic, then you invite those people who have made serious scholarly contributions to the subject. And I think that's where we differ. Had it been clear to me...
Everyone was invited.
That there had been, excuse me? I didn't hear that.
Everyone was invited. Anyone who wanted.
You invite, let's start with basics. The world's leading authority in the Nazi Holocaust in the Western world is Raoul Hilberg. Was he invited?
Well, his Hollywood version is very well known.
You know, Raoul Hilberg
and the scholars who came, like Professor Faurisson, very much talk in terms of the Hilberg claims.
Raoul Hilberg is as much the Hollywood version as I am the Hollywood version. Raoul Hilberg endorsed my book, The Holocaust Industry. That doesn't sound like Hollywood to me.
These people will not come and talk.
Excuse me?
They refuse debate, don't you know? They refuse debate.
I'm not so sure about that because I asked at the beginning,
oh, you can
who
be.
did you invite?
Everybody. Everybody who wanted to come was invited.
No, I don't think that's accurate.
There was a call for papers, 800 people.
Dr. Finkelstein, definitely I could tell you that even believers in Holocaust and people thinking that 6 million people were killed were invited. They obviously turned down the invitation. So
I don't understand. Look, I'm trying to be respectful.
You yourself.
And everybody knows I have paid a price for my views on this topic.
That's right.
But
this is why we respect you.
There are bottom lines of discussion of some topics in my view. And to talk about being a believer in the Holocaust is like saying, are you a believer in the world being round? It's not a question of being a believer.
If you don't, you are arrested. It's a belief.
It's a bottom line. Do you want to tell me?
I want
to ask you a simple question. Do you want to tell me that when every single member on my mother and father's side of the family was exterminated during the war in Treblinka, in gas chambers, do you want to tell me it didn't happen and that they are still alive, living somewhere in Siberia? Is that what you want to tell me?
As far as I can see from the revisionist arguments and their evidence, no proofs capable of standing up to the examination have been produced.
Dr. Finkelstein, would you please tell us your views
So
on the
telling me
Holocaust?
they're living in Siberia?
Dr. Finkelstein, would you tell us
Or
your
maybe
views?
they're living in Fiji.
Dr. Finkelstein?
You have to answer that question for
Sorry?
me.
I didn't hear the question, I'm sorry.
I said, then where are they? Are they in Fiji?
Well, a lot of people think they're living under altered names in Israel because the demographics after 3 years after they're supposed to have been perished during the war, they not only have enough people to people an entirely new state, and 3 years after that they also have a weapons of mass destruction program at the end of the 1940s, and they also emigrated all over the world. So there's something very suspicious
Okay, so you think
about this
my mother and
concept
father's
of
family are
this
all still
eliminating.
alive and they changed their names and they live in Israel. Do you also believe in the Easter Bunny?
Dr.
I'm
Finkelstein.
sorry, that's the level you're arguing at.
Okay, Dr. Finkelstein, please.
You're making, I don't care about what you're saying. It doesn't hurt me. It doesn't bother me.
Okay, fine.
It's not intended to hurt you. It's not a personal issue. It's a scientific examination. You bring it to a personal issue.
Okay, Dr. Finkelstein, you haven't been invited to this program to be embarrassed on a political
I'm not
roundtable.
embarrassed.
Okay, would you please tell us, Dr. Finkelstein, would you please tell us your views regarding the Holocaust?
There are certain, let's start from the basics.
Very briefly, please.
Okay, I'll be brief, I promise you. The basics are, there is no question that during World War II, between 5 and 6 million Jews were systematically, methodically exterminated in assembly line fashion by the Nazi regime.
Right.
That's the bottom line.
Okay.
After that bottom line, it happens that there is lots of room for honest disagreement and debate. For example, let's take a basic question.
Right.
Why did the Nazis do it? Why? Do you know what? There's all sorts of debate and dispute about the why.
Right.
Whether it was for ideological reasons, whether it was for practical reasons, there's lots of dispute. Another question, when did it begin? When did the Nazi extermination begin? There's a lot of dispute about that. In fact, as I'm trying to illustrate, the why and the when, those are still open to debate and dispute among serious scholars. So I am not saying there's no reason for disagreement.
So Dr. Finkelstein says 6 million, there is no argument about it. We had 10
I said 5 to 6
5
million.
to 6 million, right? I apologize. Over 5 million. We had 10 extermination camps. Is it feasible for 5 million to have been?
It's not reasonable, you know, if you consider the number of Jews living in Europe, something about 7 millions, I mean, something about this 7 or 8 millions, and you believe that 5 or 6 million of them were living inside Germany or in territories which the German Nazi government take the control
7
of.
million under Nazi-occupied Europe.
Okay,
7
and saying that 5 or 6 million of
And
those.
what is the proof of this gas chamber?
If you believe
How
that
could you
something about.
possibly kill anything like that
Lady
number?
Michèle Renouf, we'll get back to you. Please let our Tehran guest have his say before we get back to you.
If you believe that 5 or 6 million of these 7 million population were killed or executed or somehow thrown into the gas chambers, then what happens to those millions of people who have immigrated from Germany? You know, when the Nazis were in control in Germany and other parts of Europe, we had a huge amount of people, a huge population of Jews immigrated to the United States, to Russia, to Britain, to Palestine. I mean, where does this figure comes from?
Does it add up?
And at the same time, you know, there are 10. It's said that there are 10 death camps. How can 6 million people be executed or be killed in just 2 or 3 year period? You know, from the first days, it said that the chambers were made during the last 2 or 3 days, 2 or 3 years of war.
Right.
So the number does not match. You know, killing 5 or 6 million people in just 2 or 3 days. This is something. I mean, it's not something logical, sir.
Okay,
Sir,
we'll get back to you, Dr. Finkelstein. We'll get back to you. Please let's have Lady Renouf her say.
Well, the pointed issue really is this concept of this mass murder weapon. This is the issue that we need to discuss. Where is the proofs that stand up to examination on this? This is why we need an open, normal, historical debate on these issues. We should not need to go to Tehran in order to be able to assemble people in order to have this discussion. It should be a normal process, because Western source skepticism, with no bottom line at all, is normal. We would like to see this subject and those subjects pertaining to it normally accessible in kitchens, with academics, in any which way. It should be something that is open and available in the West, in our free West, and it simply isn't. And if I may just quote 2 journalists who are saying, I think, the right thing, that the Guardian journalist Tim Garton-Ash, on October 19th last year, he was calling for the release from the Viennese prison of David Irving, the expert on World War II and the Third Reich, and he wrote as well, quote, far from criminalizing denial of the Armenian genocide, we should be decriminalizing denial of the Holocaust. Then there was the Times journalist Ben McIntyre on December 20th, 2006, and he wrote, quote, the proper reaction to Mr. Ahmadinejad is not to demand that such Holocaust revision events be outlawed, but still less to try to silence or imprison cranks such as Irving. Instead, the global community should hold its own conference, inviting also the international pariahs of Tehran. Now, this is the kind of thing that we really want to talk about. The concept of releasing us from this thrall to be able to speak frankly about the source skepticism that is the basis of our culture. This is what we are being denied. Our war dead are being denied the very thing that we are told we went to war in World War I and World War II, these 2 horrible intergentile wars, for which neither side benefited but a third party did.
Okay.
As Professor Finkelstein has noted. This is what we need to straighten out. All of these aspects need to be talked about, either in the kitchen sink or in academic circles. It doesn't matter. We should be able to speak about it, and there's something radically wrong if we cannot.
Thank you. Dr. Finkelstein, your comments, and would you also please tell me, as far as you're concerned, your views regarding freedom of speech, why are people who query this, the Holocaust are persecuted? We had some participants being persecuted upon returning to the country.
You know, I feel like we're talking in circles at this point. I think my views of freedom of speech are clear. No thought whatever across the board should be criminalized. That's, for me, an uncontroversial opinion.
Right.
But that's not what we're discussing now. Even maniacs have the right to speak, but you don't invite a maniac to a conference to have a serious discussion. And what you're proposing here is to make no distinction between what people say, as the woman put it, at a kitchen sink, and what they say at a conference. That's not serious. And I don't think anyone in Iran would use that standard. For example, if you were to have a conference on how to build a nuclear bomb, you would not invite people who are discussing the topic around a kitchen sink. You would invite serious physicists who have done research in the topic and who are knowledgeable.
Right.
Do you know why I think you
They
would do
were
that?
invited. Such people
you
were
know
invited.
why I think you would do that? Because you are now acquiring nuclear capability.
Dr.
So
Finkelstein,
that
you were invited, sir. Sir.
That tells me Iranians know how to do serious research, and they
Right.
know the difference between flat Earth societies and physics.
But the
So
fact
you have
remains.
you have a clear notion of the distinction.
Right.
And all I'm saying is, when it comes to topics like the Nazi Holocaust, you use the same scholarly standard. You don't invite
But people
a
around the
farmer-
kitchen sink are imprisoned.
Okay, okay, let me just, we've got 1 minute left.
Okay,
Dr.
I'm gonna
Finkelstein,
take-
people of your caliber were invited to the meeting, and unfortunately you turned the invitation down.
I don't think it's accurate.
Okay.
I don't think that's an
Okay,
accurate
we
statement.
have to pursue that topic in another forum program. That's we've got 40 seconds left, and I'd like to give it to our Tehran guest, Mr. Qasemi. 40 seconds.
Sir, you mentioned that 5 or 6 million people were killed
30
during the Holocaust. I was wondering, in 4 or 5 decades after the Holocaust event, during all those investigations, there was never a written permit or an order issued by the Nazi government found.
Right.
How can 5 or 6 million people be killed
Okay,
without
Mehran
any written
Qasemi, we
permit?
have to continue that topic maybe in a future program. That's all the time we have left. I'd like to thank our London guest, Lady Michèle Renouf, human rights activist. We are joined in Chicago by Dr. Norman Finkelstein, Political Science Department of DePaul University, and Tehran by Mehran Qasemi. Thank you for watching Forum. Please send us your comment at sahatv@irib.ir. Thanks and good night.